Welcome back to the Moyne Way Podcast, where we explore the people, ideas, and everyday moments that shape life here at Moyne College, told through authentic stories, open conversations, and the spirit that makes this community one of purpose and belonging. Thanks for joining us this week on the Moyne Way Podcast, and I am blessed to be with the man, the myth, the legend, Stefon Greene in the building. Stefon, how we living?
I'm doing okay. Way too much credit. But
Way too much. Nah, not even close to enough.
it's an honor to be here.
It is. It's an honor to have you. I mean, we're in a space that you have had a heavy influence on creating and structuring. So I just want to give you your flowers for that. But
I appreciate that.
something that I am really interested in, and something that I know people want to know, is what are some of the early contexts that really shaped you into the man sitting in front of me today? When it comes to perspective, when it comes to the people that were in your life, when it comes to, when you think about how you see the world today, and then you think about your childhood, what are the things that come to mind?
Oh man, that's a heavy one, and stuff. But I think a lot goes into. So first and foremost, I'm born and raised here in Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
All Syracuse City schools. So if you know Syracuse, you know how the trajectory of going through public schools in Syracuse is and stuff like that. But technically all Southside schools, which Van Dyne, Clary, and Corcoran. And I came to, after I graduated high school, took some time off, decided to go back to school. I went to OCC for a couple years and came to Moyne and stuff, and graduated in 2014 with a degree in communications, a concentration in documentary film. And kind of hit the ground running doing media stuff. I worked 4 years at a local TV station here. And then I came back to Moyne to help run, at the time, the communications and film studies department. And now, and kind of revamp the space. I've been here 8 years now, but again, that question is interesting because I'm a huge cinema nerd. We talk about it a lot. And stuff, and I'm a huge cinephile, so I feel like stories matter and they shape you into who you are, and stuff like that. And I've just always been super appreciative of my story, my hardships, and my successes, and just take them into every situation as a lesson and stuff. And I've said, we've talked extensively about things like that, about how your mistakes aren't necessarily mistakes; they're lessons to be learned from, and stuff, so you don't do them again and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So everything, I think, around me shapes who I am and how I see the world today.
You said you took a break when you graduated high school before you went back to school.
Yeah.
What was that? What was going on in that break? And why did you not go straight to college?
That break was, I think, a lot of just being, to be honest, a lot of just being tired of school. We go to school when we first enter them doors at kindergarten. We in it until, we are in it for the most formidable and difficult parts of our lives and stuff. You're talking about adolescence, learning social interactions and learning those things and stuff like that. So I was just so tired, and I had a struggle in high school and stuff. I wasn't invested like I should have been. I wasn't learning the right lessons, not only from the school, but also just from life and stuff. So I was kind of checked out. And I just didn't want to, at that time, I didn't see myself going higher than what I was.
Wow.
And stuff like that. There's in underserved communities, there's this sense that, and I've always tried not to believe in it, that I felt like high school might be the best part of my life, the best time of my life, and I didn't want it to be that. So I kind of got a little depressed about it and just didn't want to do school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do and stuff. So I worked full time in restaurants and stuff like that. Just trying to make my way as an adult, and stuff like that. So,
and what was the moment that going back to school kind of popped into your head? Like, what was going on? Like, what made you even have that inclination to be like, you know what, maybe I should go back to school?
That's interesting because I talk about this before. I talk in classes in our core 100s a lot, and I talked about this before. I remember at that time in my life, I thought I still wanted to live kind of like a street life, not not hardcore and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I still thought the streets was what's gonna care for me.
Because it was kind of all you knew.
Yeah, it was all I knew.
it was
Yeah,
what
and
you
stuff
grew up
like
in,
that.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody saying something to me one time about the streets that they were gonna do, and it didn't sound right to me. It was the first time in my life I heard it, and I was like,
Wow.
"It don't sound right," and stuff like that. And then I just couldn't do that no more. So I needed to do something else. At the time, documentary TV shows were really popular and stuff like that. So I was watching a lot of them. Talk about like Deadliest Catch, Dirtiest Jobs. Discovery Channel was dominating.
Dirtiest Jobs.
Yeah, and stuff like that. Mythbusters, crazy stuff like that, which is having a resurgence on TikTok right now. But things like that. But I still didn't know that that's the direction I wanted to go. What happened was I was working in a restaurant full time, doing prep work. It was a nightclub attached to it. So I got this idea that I wanted to be in hospitality.
Okay.
And stuff. I was like, I'm gonna open a nightclub, have a restaurant, live this lifestyle,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, cause I was seeing it, I was in it, and stuff like that. So I decided to go to OCC for hospitality.
Wow.
I went in as a hospitality major. I was taking food prep classes. I was taking hotel management classes, taking all these things. And then it changed. I took a class called Voices of Diversity, I think it was called.
Voices of Diversity.
And it was an English class. It was like an English elective. And it was the first time I got introduced to authors like James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and stuff like that. Different stories that express different things and stuff like that. It was the first time I ever heard of the term and knew what the term like coming out story was for LGBTQ and stuff like that. So we read stories like that. And it just I told myself, I was like, I could be a storyteller. Wow. And stuff like that. I wanted to tell stories. I love movies. I love film. But I didn't want to write. I thought being an author and I thought being a writer was difficult. I thought it was a different type of discipline, and so I didn't want to do that. And then I just got the idea. I was like, I can make documentaries and stuff like that. I like documentaries, real and stuff. So I changed my major at OCC to general studies, applied to Moyne after I knew I was going to graduate, and came in Moyne right as a communications major and stuff and hit the ground running.
That's wild. And so there was no like seeds planted when you were young when it comes to like cinema, film, production. Like you weren't tapped into any of that young?
So what's interesting is that I realized that later on in life.
Like when you look back in hindsight.
Yeah, I look back in hindsight because I lived with my grandmother in my younger years and stuff. For almost 10 years when I was a kid, and stuff like that. My mom had struggles, and stuff. So my grandmother raised me, and I was the only child in the house, right? So, and when you're the only child in the house, there's a mix of greater responsibility to be independent. Yeah. And there's also a little bit of spoiledness because you're the only child in the house, and stuff. So I had a bunch of toys. I had my own room to watch TV. That's how I watched a bunch of films and stuff like that. And, in the 90s, when cable was at its peak, there's channels that would just show movies all day. Yeah. And stuff like that. And then my grandmother didn't have any, kind of reservations about what I watched and stuff because the TV censored stuff and stuff. The TV took out cuss words. The TV took out bad content and stuff. It's not like now and stuff where you got to constantly monitor what your kids are watching online and stuff. So she just let me have it. And I used to play with my toys and set up scenes and do all these things. But the thing is, I didn't have a camera. I didn't know, I didn't have a camera to film those things or do those things. But when I look hindsight, I was directing a little bit of my own content, my own entertainment, and stuff like that. And it was just, learning and seeing and experience media and stuff through cable television was amazing. I saw classics that I probably shouldn't have been watching at a young age and stuff, but I was introduced to that world and stuff. And I think about watching Scorsese films on cable TV and John Singleton films on cable TV, and stuff like that, and getting introduced to those ideas and stuff way early on and stuff like that. But it contributed to my education. It contributed to my film education as I moved forward. So
there was a love for it early on.
Oh, for sure.
It was there.
It was.
And then when you got to college and you started to explore and you tapped into that that diversity of voices of diversity.
Voices of diversity.
That it's almost like that class like reignited that spark within
Oh,
you?
for sure.
Because like, do you feel like when you were young, growing up in the inner city in Syracuse, do you feel like you had the love for it, but you didn't really see anybody or any example of this actually being a life or a career?
For sure.
So it was kind of just something you were doing, but not thinking like I could do this.
You definitely think that because you don't see it,
Mm.
and people don't realize how that is and stuff like that. You come from an athletic background and stuff, and I said this before you play ball your whole life and stuff because you see people from your community that are successful in it, no matter the height that they go, whether they go, whether they win the high school state championship or they win the college national
You
championship,
surrounded by it.
or they go to
Yeah.
the NBA, the stages that you make it, and stuff like that. So I didn't see that and stuff like that, especially in the media realm. But I saw stories that were, I felt like all our stories were the same
Mm.
and stuff. And that's what I wanted to be different, and stuff like that. I wanted to be outside of, I think I tried to spend so much time trying to be like everybody else. When I decided not to be like everybody else, I really flipped the script and did it 100%
Wow.
and stuff like that. I stopped like thinking about the culture as something I was trying to be a part of and just trying to build my own perspective on things and stuff. So I accepted a lot of things about myself. I accepted that I was like a comic book and a sci-fi nerd and stuff like that. I started accepting things about myself that I normally wouldn't speak and stuff like that because of judgment and because of things and stuff. And those are things I appreciate about working in higher education, because young people come to higher education to learn those things. And I was a non-traditional college student. I started at OCC at 22,
Wow.
came to Lemoyne at 24 or something like that, or it might be 2 years shifted. But I was way past that adolescent kind of age where, I still had, my parents to depend on, and I still had that. Was fully like my wife now, girlfriend then, we were fully independent. She had
Wow.
a full-time job. I had a full-time job in most cases and stuff like that. Ended up doing part-time so I could go to school and stuff. So I think my priorities were shifted. And that kind of, again, all led into who I am today as a professional and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really profound point about like accepting yourself finally. Like you've lived this whole life where it's like you were trying to be somebody you're not, and you became aware that you were trying to be somebody you're not because you found something that you were, and
Yeah.
it was like that ain't aligned with what I've been doing. That must have been incredibly like eye opening and taking a lot of courage to lean into that.
It does take a lot of courage to lean into it. And but I didn't feel like that at the time.
Mm.
I felt like in some ways you feel like you are kind of betraying a little bit of yourself,
Wow.
and you betraying a little bit of where you come from. It's hard to kind of tell yourself you don't want to be like where you come from and stuff like that. And I think it's sometimes we take into consideration, we want to so much like be appreciative and grasp hold of legacy and stuff like that, but it's hard to accept that not everybody's legacy is good and stuff like that. I think people of particularly people of color in this country, and people that come from, whether you come from underserved communities, white or black, whether you are immigrant or refugee or anything like that, it's hard to we have to learn to break cycles and stuff like that, no matter the situation, and stuff like that. If you're a refugee coming from a war-torn country, you're trying to break the cycle
So
that
true.
your fathers and your parents experience. That's why you come and stuff like that to another country for success and stuff. When I think when you're a black man in America, there's a lot of cycles and things about success and who we are and misogyny and all those things that affect us that we're trying to break cycles from, and stuff like that. But at the same time, nobody wants to be like, my parents weren't the greatest or and stuff like that. But all we're trying to do is be better than we were and be better, a little bit better than where we come from,
Absolutely.
and stuff like that. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what was your experience like when you first got to Lemoyne? Obviously, you said you came in a little older.
Yeah.
But what was that like? Finishing at OCC, you at OCC, you kind of like unpacked this new like, dang, like film, cinematography, all that type of stuff. I actually want to pursue this, and then taking that into Lemoyne. What was that like early experience like coming into Lemoyne? And
First at OCC, just the idea that I finished.
Mm.
Just the idea, like I graduated high school, but it was literally by the skin of my teeth. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was like the door to graduation was closing, and I like eased through, and stuff like that. Like I didn't find out I was graduating until I took my wife, now girlfriend, then to graduation rehearsal.
Wow.
I took her to rehearsal, and they told me I was graduating at rehearsal.
Wow.
Graduation was 2 days away, and this is high school. I went home from rehearsal with a cap and gown that my mom didn't know I was bringing home, and stuff. So then when I got to OCC, I'm like, I finished, I got it done, and then I was like, I went into Lemoyne, like, now I have to keep going through. Then something else happens, like, then it builds up, like people say, like, the weight of the world is on your shoulders, like that term. But then I started feeling like, now I have to do something more. Now I have to finish Lemoyne and stuff like that. I have to take the next step, not in a necessarily negative way, but then I had to be like, well, now I got to take the next step and finish this, and stuff. And that's really how I felt, and stuff. It wasn't till my second year or in between years at Lemoyne, and I took my like formal documentary film class, that I really found that I loved the idea of telling people stories and stuff like that. But just to go back a little bit, when I got to Lemoyne, my core 100 class really affected me, and that one, and then also my required religion class here at Lemoyne affected me because I come from a religious family, but I'm not a super religious and spiritual person and stuff like that. I have a saying, I tell people, like, sometimes people have been like, are you an atheist? I'm like, no, I'm not an atheist and stuff like that.
Right.
But I'm also like, I don't go to church every Sunday and stuff like that. But I tell people, like, I believe that religion is probably one of the top 3 most important things to the human condition, because we as human beings want to understand something. And when we don't understand something, we say, well, in Baptist churches, give it to God and stuff like that. and it's just like, so but my religion class here at Lemoyne was Native American religion in this area.
Wow.
So I felt like I was learning about my community. I felt like I was learning about where I was from, and stuff. And then my core 100 class was on St. Ignatius. As simple as that. Like, we learned about Jesuits. I had never knew what a Jesuit was until I came to Lemoyne.
Never until I came.
And a lot of people say that, like,
same.
You come to, like, it's a Jesuit school, and you're like, and then interestingly enough, my grandparents worked here in the 90s. My grandfather cleaned Harrison Hall. My grandmother cleaned St. Mary's.
Wow.
And so I knew about Lemoyne. I knew Lemoyne was a college and stuff like that. I remember picking my grandmother up after her shift and stuff like that, and with my uncle, and stuff. So I knew what Lemoyne was, and I had that attachment to it, but I didn't know what a Jesuit was. I didn't know what made Jesuit priests different from, like, I don't know if you say traditional Catholic priests
just
or whatever,
priests,
but I heard in the St. Ignatius story, and when they like talk about his story of transformation and being something different, I was literally in the midst of that. I was literally in my life, like, I'm going from something different, so drastically different too. Like, I was learning different lessons. I was thinking about the world in different ways, and stuff like that. I was at the time learning to be not only a good student, I was learning to be a good partner to my wife and stuff, and I was learning to be a good son, and all those things was happening all at the same time. And so I really attached myself to St. Ignatius, this idea that you change yourself from something to be and build something greater. And for those that don't know a lot about St. Ignatius, he was a different person.
Way different.
Before finding the Bible. You talk about, like, some of the things we read that described him as, like, being a ladies' man and womanizer,
very wealthy, I think,
violent, very wealthy,
all this stuff, and he left it all.
That, and left it all. So that was big to me, and stuff, and just the idea of Jesuit education, I really attached myself to.
Wow.
Pure personalis and cannonball moments and just realizing that things could be a lot different.
Mm. That must have been incredibly liberating, and I feel like for some people it could have been overwhelming.
Oh
You
yeah.
realizing you've been living a certain way your whole life, and then you get exposed to a new way, and you're like, I want to step into this. But
Yeah.
that's a lot of stuff that you have to let go of.
Oh, you
You
do.
know,
You
for
definitely.
you, was it more overwhelming or excitement?
It was a little bit of both.
Mm.
It was overwhelming because you don't want to fail, obviously, and you don't want to fail yourself, and you don't want to fail the people around you and stuff. And then, especially when you come from a world and you come from experiences where people think that like they have an expectation of you and stuff like that to be greater than wherever we come from, and stuff like that. So it was a little bit of both, but I just wanted to see it through and stuff. I wanted to make sure, more or less for myself, I wanted to see it through. So the excitement was that I could have a better life, but the nervousness was, again, failure and stuff, and just the overwhelmingness of it. And I think that's one thing we don't tell freshmen coming into college enough, that how overwhelming it can actually be. The idea that in most cases, maybe 75% of cases, this is the first time you've lived your independent life. You're away from your parents, you're away from your home in most cases, no matter if it's a mile away from your childhood hometown or 1,000 miles away,
Right.
and stuff. So we don't express how overwhelming it is and how difficult it is to be in this independent world and learn new social values, new ideas of friendship, new experiences, new ways of thinking, new likes and dislikes and stuff like that. You can, if you're a high school student coming from a rural town, and 90% of what people care about is football or basketball or lacrosse, and then you come to a place where you realize you may like theater or you may like the arts a little more than you thought you did, it's hard to step out of what you know and stuff like that. So, again, I was just in the midst of all that. I think I was just lucky that I was older and had other life experiences to kind of help support that.
Wow. And I think that probably speaks to why you're so open and willing to help students, find themselves in this space and, try new things and stuff. Cause maybe not maybe, because you've experienced that in your own life, and you know the importance of, stepping outside of what you've known into something that you're a little bit curious about.
Oh man, it's so important to be open-minded. I think that's one of the most underutilized qualities that most people have, and that people can have, they just don't use and stuff. Just try something different once. First of all, there's nothing wrong with saying you don't like something. There's nothing wrong with saying something's not for you,
Right.
And stuff like that. I saw a meme the other day, and it's like it was like when you suggest the movie. It was like a meme of you suggest the movie, but then you up there anxious, you produced, directed, and distributed the whole thing.
Because you suggest a movie to somebody else.
Yeah, and then now you worry that they won't like it because you like it. It's nothing wrong with them not liking it, and it's nothing wrong with you liking it maybe a little bit more, and stuff like that. So just be open-minded to things, and stuff like that, and just be able to accept the things that you can accept and stuff, and just be okay with other people also maybe not being okay with it and stuff like that. We don't all have to like the same things. We don't all have to do the same things and stuff. And I think that's a little bit louder nowadays in our realm of social media. But
Very true. You so when you came to Lemoyne, what did you say you were studying?
so I came in as a communications major,
Okay.
with a concentration in documentary film, but I had a minor in literature. So I got to take a lot of English classes. I got to, take a lot of film history classes. And my film history classes was amazing. Shout out to Professor Grossman.
Yeah, professor.
For film history, and stuff. Then I started seeing classics that, and understanding the theory of film, and that was eye opening. So understanding, seeing movies, then seeing why directors and writers and filmmakers, how the craft, how the bread is actually baked, and the love that goes into it and stuff like that. And that definitely changed my perspective about media. and about stories and stuff like that.
And I was gonna ask like when you're you know taking all that in and stuff and watching these films and reading these books and doing all this studying, like what about it was like, yeah, this is something I want to do? Like what about it made you feel like this is something I want to do? Where did you see yourself in it?
So when we went, I took a class called it was a convergence course in documentary film. Uh, Shout out to Mike Streisku. You had him on. He taught this class. It's a 4-person class at the time. So 4 students. We interviewed to be in the class.
Okay.
So at the time, he was serving as interim dean of arts and sciences here at Lemoyne. So I went to the dean's office to do this interview for this class, and we talked. I think we talked for maybe 30 minutes or so. Asked what I wanted to do. He asked why I wanted to take the class, and I was like, I think it was interesting. I want to take a documentary class. So we spent the fall semester learning about Quito, Ecuador. And we learned about making a documentary film. The whole fall semester, 4-person class. It's in like a conference room here at Lemoyne. It's not even in a classroom. We're in a conference room learning. So very intimate and stuff like that. 4 students, we're a group, like we're a crew and stuff like that. So we learned about Quito, Ecuador, and then the winter break, we go to Ecuador for 5 days and we film everything we need to film for the documentary.
That's wild.
And then the spring semester, I spend the semester editing the documentary. Granted, though, I was learning about the people we were going to talk to. We learned about the church. The Catholic Church runs a center in Quito, Ecuador, and the Jesuits run a center called the Working Boys Center. Okay. They help working boys of Quito, Ecuador. Quito, Ecuador had a history of having young boys survive in the streets by shining shoes.
Wow.
And so this priest and 2 nuns went there and opened up the Working Boy Centers to educate the whole family and stuff like that. So they bring the boys in to learn. They bring the dads into work. They bring the moms into work. And it's a center to educate the whole family. And our film was focused on one little girl who goes to the Working Boy Center to learn English every morning along with her regular classes. Lemoyne was always sending students down there and volunteers. So all Jesuit schools around the country send students there. So we were going there. Yep. So we were going there to make this film, focus on this little girl, have interviews and talk about the Working Boy Center. The catch was we had a Lemoyne student who was translating for us and stuff, but she was very new in her Spanish and stuff like that. So we didn't really have an idea of what any of our interviews said. You know, we did 5 days worth of interviews, and I was coming back on the plane like, I don't know if we even have a film and stuff like that. But that was the magic about the lessons that Mike Streisku was showing us about documentary film is that sometimes you just have to be able to get all the information and see how that story unfolds.
And that was your first time doing a film like that?
Oh yeah,
the first time.
Film, yeah, and stuff. I look at it now. As I've done more production, I look at it now. I'll go back and be like, that was definitely a student film. It wasn't up to par.
Oh yeah,
I'll re-edit something.
Yeah, you're looking at it from your seat now.
And stuff. Mean, of course. But no, it was the first time having that kind of experience, and it was when I really realized I fell in love with not only telling stories, but helping other people tell their stories.
Fell in love with it.
Yep, and that translated right into my first job after Lemoyne.
I was going to talk about that. What was that transition like?
So I left Lemoyne after I was going to graduate this summer. I'll tell you, and this is, and to connect everything is crazy because I get to sit most of the time I sit in the control room while you record this podcast. So I've seen everybody firsthand who's been on it. And I remember my last semester at Lemoyne, I got my first freelance job. Travis Newton. He was running VPA at the time. He emails me. He's like, we need a video to talk about VPA. And I was like, okay, I'll do a video. They was like, they're going to pay me. I'm going to do a video for them. Stuff. He gave me my first freelance job in media. It was the first time I ever got paid for it and stuff.
That's a pivotal moment.
It is a pivotal moment. And, then I thought, like, I learned all these things. And then I'm like, this is my first little bit of money that I get from it. So that summer I applied to, before the semester was over, I applied to WCNY. It's our local PBS here in Syracuse. And they reached back out, and I did a phone interview, and then I did an interview, and then they hired me as a production assistant. And I was like, I'll go in starting in interestingly enough, that was the first time I also experienced one thing that underserved communities and students don't never really get to experience is I experienced a little bit of nepotism.
Hmm.
Because at the time, the guy who was running the production assistants and hiring at WCNY was a longtime Syracuse native musician and drummer and stuff. And he frequented a music store that one of my uncles used to work at. And so when that came up, he knew me and stuff like that. And then I think that contributed to him hiring me and stuff like that. So it was the first time also my community and where I'm from affected my future and stuff like that. So, I went in, worked, I think 4 or 5 months as a production assistant. Then they promoted me to associate producer. And then about 6 months after that, they had me come in and they promoted me again to producer, unofficially of public affairs television. So I was going to be running a every Friday public affairs show that focuses on different stories all over. And then in that time there, I helped develop their statewide public affairs show. And that was an hour-long show that did a mix of packages and studio panel discussions. So I did that for 4 years.
Wow.
And stuff. For the Every Friday show, I produced 250 brand new episodes and stuff like that. We got nominated for 2 New York State Emmys and stuff. And I really, every Friday, I got to prepare a show where I got to tell other people's stories from, I always talk about one particular one to, high school seniors doing graduate level science work at SU to, just talking about stories about the Erie Canal to one Friday before Christmas, we had Santa Claus come in and do an interview and stuff. But I got to do so many different things and meet so many different people and learn so many new things about my community. I'll tell you, at WCNY, when I worked there, telling the stories, working on my show, I saw more of Central New York surrounding area than I had ever saw in my whole life. And stuff like that. I saw towns that I never even heard of, been to places I never even heard of. That's literally 45 minutes away from Syracuse and stuff. So it was amazing.
It opened your eyes.
Oh,
you start to see, and you start to realize that these people and these stories were around you the whole time, like right around Syracuse.
I did a story one time about a forest like camp, like obstacle course thing that they take kids to.
Oh yeah, okay. All right.
I forget. It's like in Beeville or somewhere out past Liverpool. We did a story about this camp and stuff, and I remember the owner and the counselor were interviewing him, and I always like my ears always raise a little bit when people say stuff about the inner city because I'm from the inner city and stuff like that. My formative years, I was right on Townsend. And Taylor, in Syracuse, just what they like to say under the shadow of SU in the projects here in Syracuse and stuff like that. So I always like my ears raised when somebody is going to say something about the inner city. But he said something. He says like, yeah, we bring a lot of kids in from the inner city, and the way we go when we come down Onondaga Lake Parkway, we've had kids in the past be like, oh my goodness, they'll see Onondaga Lake and be like, is that the ocean? And stuff, and to just think like, and then I was thinking like that, if I didn't have like experiences like this even, I would, spend my whole life within the 5 miles of Syracuse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I'm always thankful of that and stuff, that I was able to have different experiences and it continued to just make me fall in love with telling stories.
Definitely. Let's fast forward to your role here at Moyne.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what was it like first stepping into this role, and then we'll kind of move into where you are now with it.
Man, so when I got this job at Moyne, it was not unexpected, but at the time I was looking for new work because the atmosphere a little bit at WCNY was changing, and stuff like that. The world was learning a lot about what can be toxic work environments and work stress, and how work is affecting you as a person. Mental health was just starting to bubble up. I think the idea of mental health and mental health literacy and healthy emotional states was just starting to bubble up, I think, nationally. So I wanted to look for another job. I remember I was looking, and then I remember I got an email from one of the professors in communications at the time. The person that was in my job before me had already been gone for a year, so the role hadn't been filled. And he wrote an email. He was like, we were looking to film this position, but we wanted to talk to you beforehand, before we filled it. And at the time, I was at WCNY, me and Mike Streiskuth had always been in contact. I was interviewing with him for his book.
Okay.
And stuff. So I had always, stayed connected. And then I don't even know if it was maybe him that mentioned it, like, Moyne is hiring for this position. So they had me in for an interview. I met the current production professor, and I talked to the chair of the department at the time, and everything just clicked. It was like, do you want to come in and do this and stuff? And I remember making a joke to my wife and stuff. I'm like, I'm exactly 4 years from leaving Lemoyne. I'm glad because I can go there and work now, and I don't have to worry about working with anybody that was maybe in my classes that's still there and stuff. Because, I didn't want to be working and then and stuff. But there's still people I was in classes with here. And stuff. So I was just outside of that. So I came in and hit the ground running. Yeah. And I knew exactly how the system worked a little bit in here. I knew we were going to revamp it. Me and the production professor at the time, just wanted to do everything to update everything for film and stuff. And then over time, I've just continued to upgrade what students have access-wise to technology and what we have the ability to do, and stuff. And I've always just wanted to make sure that they can produce and learn the things that they're seeing currently and stuff. And I think sometimes in media, you tend to sometimes think of the classics as something that sit above what the current popularity is. And by that, I mean the way podcasts are filmed and recorded now isn't the classical way that they've been doing it and stuff like that. Or how students get news hasn't always been the classical way to do it. So we have those, I think people have those grievances of when things are so new and stuff like that. But when the fact of the matter is that it's all just the facts that needed to be checked. If I'm going to be, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, I'm going to be a person that puts myself out there to give the news or give my opinion, I just really need to make sure I'm factual and that I'm not giving people the wrong information. How we deliver it is going to be how we deliver it. That realm has been super profitable for tech reviewers, product reviewers, built influencing and stuff like that. They have less responsibility, but we have to learn that. I think in journalism there has to be that ethics, but I think there's a way for students to deliver it how they're watching it. And I've always tried to mix those things and stuff like that. So when people say, I want to do a podcast, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, I give them the technology to be able to do it. And then I'm lucky to be working with a whole bunch of professors and academics who then give them the ethics and give them the classics and the theories that make it that much more authentic and stuff. So there's always this way we mix the modern with the classical, even with the growing pains that comes with that and stuff. So I just feel like sometimes I feel like I'm this middleman of modern kind of technological media and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And the last two things I want to ask before we get into the fast round questions is, what's been your favorite thing or most rewarding part about the job you're in, the position?
Oh man, one obviously examples like yourself. You literally are sitting up here doing this, based on past conversations that we have had.
Yeah, for real.
And stuff. And I look back at all the interviews you've done so far in these like past 2 seasons now of just this podcast and your own stuff. And it's the success that students have that always is like, oh man, I saw one of I normally watch NBC News, but I was watching News Channel 9 News the other day. And I saw one of our students, doing reporting and stuff like that. And when I see our students successful out in the world and doing things, it just
Students that came through here
oh man,
were
that's
under
the
your
best.
wing, asking questions, learning stuff, and then now you're seeing them on the other side where they're actually doing the things that they first once were asking questions about.
Man, that's it right there. That's what it's all for.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing compares and stuff like that. You
Yeah.
can keep all the money, you can keep all the accolades. I tell students all the time that when they leave here and I'm like, if y'all become rich and famous, I don't need anything. Just give me a shout out in a big interview or something. Just even not even by name, even if you like,
Nah.
you know, it was this one guy, you know, back at Lemoyne.
Nah, man, we not gonna do that. We gonna say your full name, position, and everything. You deserve
But
it.
no,
I'm
that's
serious.
but no, that is really what it is. Seeing students to be able to live the things and do the things that they really like. And then it's even more better, like a little bit of icing on the cake is when they didn't know they liked it though. They didn't really know they was attachment to those things. They didn't really when they don't even think it's a possibility and stuff like that. You know,
I've seen it.
yeah, no, I remember I used to get a lot of like you should be a doctor or a lawyer and stuff like that. Like that's the only things like doctors is always gonna be needed, lawyers is always gonna be needed and stuff. And
It'll make you good money.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so many students come from legacies where they try to put them in a box and stuff. So just the first step is like just getting out the box.
Mm-hmm.
First step is like I don't care if your parents are, you know, 110% hardcore, you gonna do this, or they're 0%, do whatever you want. But the problem is the worst thing, you gotta just step out the box for yourself.
So true.
And stuff like that. Whether you being brave enough to tell like your parents or the people who raised you, like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to actually do something that makes me happy. Or you brave enough to be like, look, you haven't given me enough direction as a parent. Just let me get a little bit of guidance and stuff. Even if you're telling me what not to do, I just need a little bit of, but you have to be brave enough to ask for help when you realize you may need help and stuff. And so I'm always encouraging students, just ask for help. Just ask me before you feel like you can do it yourself, and stuff like that. Regardless of the advice I give you, I'll be honest, the advice I give you may still not go your way. You know, we still may mess up and stuff like that. I mess up on a weekly basis and stuff like that. Mess up things and forget about things and stuff like that. But, you know, we won't know until we try. I always say to students too, particularly like most 99% of things aren't life or death and stuff like that. So just ask yourself, if I mess this up, is somebody gonna die? There's only a few people in a certain amount of professions that have that to worry about. and you know, they got the training and they've took the oath to manage that and stuff. So you think about our first responders and our doctors and stuff like that. Them the only people that really got that weight on their shoulders. Like if I mess up, somebody could die. All of us, everybody else, you know, we could have messed up this whole podcast and stuff like that. But nobody's gonna die.
It's gonna be all right. Sun gonna shine tomorrow. It's gonna be all right.
Exactly.
It's gonna be all right.
But,
And what's your favorite thing about Lemoyne?
oh man, my favorite thing about Lemoyne, obviously, is the students. And I say that already knowing what everybody else has said on this podcast. Like, but it's the students, the community, and stuff like that. It's the idea that, you know, as students always say that their 4 years goes fast. But when you're from a staff and faculty perspective, it goes just as fast. You see a student come in as a freshman and then they leaving as a senior. Like you feel attached to them. You feel responsible for their well-being and stuff like that. A little bit of sadness to see them go, but a little bit of happiness to see them, you know, move on and stuff like that. Whole bunch of mix of emotions. And stuff like that. Also a little bit of happiness to, you know, see him go, you know, to be like, all right, now we get to reset. And stuff like that. I get to learn new faces, new names. It keeps me on my toes, and stuff like that. It makes me have to be like, well, what is popular right now? As the new students come in and stuff like that. What students are taking in and consuming now is different than what the students were consuming 4 years ago when they first got here.
Definitely.
So I have to be on it to learn and stuff like that.
Stay with the times.
Stay with the times.
Stay on your toes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's real. That's good. And this is last one before. You have any advice? So let's say I'm a student who's been thinking about film or getting into production, getting into media, things like that, and it's been something that's been, you know, running cycle in my mind. I've been thinking about it a lot. And I just kind of want to know, what I'm getting myself into if I
Yeah.
do take that leap. What would you say to that student?
I would say, especially in media, the advice I would give is think about where you are in your life and the literally the percentage of time you have to commit to it and stuff like that. Like I at the time when I was graduating from Lemoyne, thinking about even going to work in a local TV station, it was either work in a local TV station or commit to going to a big film market and getting it at 100%. Why I couldn't really get into 100% is that at the time we weren't married yet, but me and my wife had been together since high school. And it was 2014. We got together in 2006. We had been together a long time. We had 3 apartments at this point together. And we weren't in a position for me to like give myself 100% of being in the film world. So working 12-hour multiple film days over weeks or going to New York City to be a part of productions. But for students, if that's what you want to do it and stuff like that. If the time in your life, if you're a senior getting ready to graduate undergrad, whether you're going to get your MFA in film or you're going to New York City to try to make your way to make your own independent films, just make sure you're doing it in a time in your life where you know you have that committed, because you have to make sacrifices and stuff like that. If you're a student wanting to make films and you get your big job or you get your big break on a production from a director that you like or a movie studio that you like, and the things in life that are always going to be life in end up getting in the way of that, you have to be able to make those sacrifices. You have to be like, I maybe can't do this, or I can't go back home to do this. I can't drop work, because in actuality, and as great as the industry is for our entertainment, it's hard for the people that work there. A production assistant that can't be on set every single day of a 4-week production, the first day can't be there, he may get replaced and stuff like that. So it's hard in that sense. So you have to really tell yourself you have the time to commit to it and stuff like that. And that's exactly the advice I give everybody and stuff like that. You can't go into nothing successful without having 100% of your attention towards it and stuff like that. And it's tough to think about, because we have these sayings that people have, like family comes first, or my loved ones come first, or this comes first and stuff. And then we maybe there's this cliche that we look down if work comes first, or our success may come first, however you define success. Obviously, me and somebody like Steve Jobs define success maybe in a different way. But if Steve Jobs didn't put Apple first, there wouldn't be 2 billion iPhones in the world. It wouldn't be the tech company that it is, regardless of what you think about it. If people if Bill Gates didn't put Microsoft first, the technologies we have as a society wouldn't exist and stuff like that. The creature comforts, the things that then help us to like be who we are as a functioning, society on this planet, and stuff like that. And I mean that on other things and stuff like that. If and I say that for those modern examples of technology, but you can point it to everything. If Dr. King didn't put the cause first.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if Dr. King was like, I'm not going to this march because maybe I need to do something that's maybe like, and this is going to sound outlandish, but because I got a cousin who got in trouble, I got to go help him. And stuff like that. Like, it's simple,
but I feel you though. Be committed.
Yeah.
And make sure like you take advantage of when you have that time to go full in.
And be okay with being committed.
That's good.
And stuff like that. Like, it's gonna be hardships and stuff like that. There's definitely some things I've sacrificed to have the success that I appreciate. And I say that because, like I said, everybody defines success in a different way. But what I also appreciate is the sacrifices of people around me, particularly my wife and partner. She sacrificed a lot and stuff like that for me to go to school and stuff like that, for us to be successful and happy and all that good stuff and stuff. So, my mom sacrificed a lot my early years and stuff. So all those things I really appreciate and stuff. You know, my grandmother sacrificed retirement to just take care of a 5-year-old boy, and stuff like that when she didn't necessarily have to and stuff. You know, I got an uncle and aunt that gave me everything I needed and stuff, and they didn't have to do those things, and stuff like that. So I'm appreciative of those things too.
And shout out to everybody you just named. For
Shout
real.
out to
Shout out to all y'all. That's it for the main conversation. Now we're gonna get into the fast round.
I was ready for this one.
Yeah. So I'm excited to hear some of your answers. But Stefon, these are your fast round questions. Okay, coffee or tea?
Coffee,
Yeah.
but limited. I limit myself to coffee. So maybe 2 cups max
Okay.
at the most.
Okay.
But what I don't limit myself is the caffeine. So like if I do 1 coffee in the morning at home, I'll do a 5-hour energy and a juice on the way to work. I'll do 12 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll do a Mountain Dew. Like the caffeine that's the problem. It's not the it's the energy.
Yeah, okay. Morning person or night owl?
I would say a mix of both. So like during the week, you know, again, because I saw all these episodes, you know, we had a particular guest who said that their morning was 2:45, which that technically is a mix of both. But
yeah, no, that's crazy.
I would say a mix of both because on a school night, I definitely I get up in the morning and get myself together.
Yeah.
But
on the weekend,
if it's a good Netflix binge or something, I'm in it to 3-4 o'clock in the morning,
Respect.
baby.
Yeah, I got you.
So I got that capacity.
Yeah, I hear you. Favorite spot on campus?
My favorite spot on campus by default kind of is this studio space, man.
Come on.
You know, I'm in here tinkering and stuff like that. But, you know, I love the bridge in between the Science Center and, you know, I love the bridge in between the Science Center and Greene Hall because where I grew up in my grandmother's house, just like 5 blocks away from Lemoyne, we look over that, her living room window looked over that same kind of view of DeWitt.
Wow.
And the north side and stuff. So I always just like when I walk across that bridge, I really appreciate. And if you walk across any bridge, you know, in Greene, into Riley or into if you're on that side going into that side of Greene, you see kind of that view. And I really appreciate that view. I love that view.
Yeah, that's nice. What's a book, podcast, or movie you'd recommend?
So movie
to students.
Interestingly enough, I was thinking about this one. Books are, you know, I do a lot of reading, but I ain't gonna lie, mostly for class.
Yeah, okay, I got
and
you.
Stuff like that.
That's
like,
real.
When the professor gives you books, you attach yourself to them. Not a lot of casual reading.
Okay.
Movies, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And so much so that I learned a new term. We recorded this on the 6th, but 2 days ago was May the 4th. And stuff, and people celebrate that as, you know, a Star Wars holiday.
Oh, okay.
But it's kind of turned into everybody who maybe want to be a Star Wars fan celebrating it.
Yeah, not everybody really.
So I learned a new term. I'll tell you after we record.
Okay, all right.
Because I don't want everybody to know. So I always recommend Star Wars as a story. But my favorite movie is Menace to Society, and it's a John Singleton. You know. It's a John Singleton movie from the 90s about South Central LA and
Menace to Society.
Menace to Society. You know, it's his more famous movie in that location and in that time period is Boys in the Hood. But I've always considered Menace to Society to be the better movie. And just because the story is a little bit better, not story's a little bit better, but I just attached myself to it.
It's just it's just what you. Yeah,
I got you. More. So I always suggest people watch Menace to Society.
All right. Who or what inspires you most right now?
My students inspire me. They inspire me especially the ones who are willing to learn and willing to take it in, and stuff like that. And also the ones who aren't afraid to ask for help and stuff. So,
word. If you could instantly learn one new skill, what would it be?
Everybody on this couch always says language and stuff to be able to, like, because you always say I will learn any language. Yeah. And that's the most valuable one, I think, to be able to learn any language and go anywhere in the world and operate and move without.
I don't think there's a better one.
Yeah, without hindrance and stuff like that.
Well, Nathan said teleport, which is valid.
That is
But
valid.
I ain't know teleporting was a skill.
Yeah.
I
Like,
thought that was a superpower.
yes. And you're right. And I ain't knocking Nathan Pitt and stuff like that. But language is great because if you teleport to like the place you always wanted to go, I always wanted to go to Japan.
Boom.
I could teleport in the
Off
middle of Tokyo, but if I can't speak the language or
Right.
get around,
Yeah.
I can't operate. But you can. If you learn any language, you can operate and move
Anywhere.
anywhere and stuff like that.
Favorite food spot in or around Syracuse?
So one of my favorite food spots is Darwin's on Clinton downtown.
Sandwich spot.
The sandwich spot.
Okay.
Gotta
try it still.
It is. Me and my wife are also very partial to Twin Trees and Camillus.
Okay. All right. Twin Trees. Word.
We love Twin Trees. Shout out to them.
Shout out to Twin Trees. Twin Trees. One word to describe Lemoyne.
Oh. Life changing. And that's 2 words, but still.
It could be one. Technically,
Yeah.
I think if you put the little
transformative.
Transformative, I like that one. Life changing and transformative.
Sometimes
Fire.
You gotta revise.
Yeah. 2 more actually. What's the best piece of advice you've ever heard, received, or given?
Interesting. The best piece of advice I think I've ever been given, and this is, shout out to my aunt who just got out of surgery yesterday for a liver transplant. She's doing good. But she said to me she used to say to me, you won't ever get anywhere in life without manners. It's a simple one. But please and thank you, man. They go a long way and stuff like that. When a student writes me for something or writes me to ask me a question, just a simple idea that they have a please or thank you at the end of their email or stuff like that. Appreciate you or something like that. That doesn't even really just please and thank you manners. They go a long way and stuff. And it's in the simplest of form. Like somebody gives you the right of way in traffic. Just that hand of a thank you just shows all that stuff, and it really changes. A please, a thank you, or a sorry can literally change, can be life-changing and stuff like that. And it could avoid a lot of conflicts, probably could have avoided a lot of wars and stuff like that. You think about world leaders and things like that. Some of them just would have been like, maybe sorry or thank you.
Manners.
They go a long way. So shout out to my Aunt Ann, who has always taught me that manners to take you a long way.
That's good. If everyone from the Lemoyne community was listening right now, what would you want to say?
Ooh, I would want to say, 1, always, whether you're here at Lemoyne coming in as a freshman or you're leaving, going out, as an alumni, just remember what you learned here, those core things about, care for the whole self. Continue to do that. Continue to care for your whole self. Continue to, think about how you can transform the world in that way. There's a, Jesuit saying, set the world on fire and stuff like that, and continue to kind of like take those lessons into the world, and be confident about them. I know that's a lot, but, just be honest with yourself. First and foremost, be honest with yourself and who you are.
I love that. Stefon, this was a great conversation, man.
Thank you. It was.
Yeah, appreciate you.
As nervous as I was. But
yeah, nah, man, you did great. And we could have sat here for probably another hour, to be honest. But I saw the time; he had to keep resetting. So I was like, yeah, we gotta put it up. But I do appreciate you taking time today. That is it for today. We want to give a huge thanks to LCTV and Stefon for making this podcast possible here in the studio space, to the Carroll College of Arts and Sciences, to the Grace Center for making this possible, and to Put God First, whose support helps to make this podcast run each and every week. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Grace Center and LCTV in the links below so you never miss out. And I will see you in the next episode. Deuces.